very central ideas in these books. I'd like to hear some. Yeah, sure. Okay.
To preserve my time at the beginning, I didn't use my slide to respond to your question, so now's my chance. I don't think that we're the native life form in the cyberspace. We were evolved in a world of up, down, left, right, day, night, father, family, son, child. We live in a different space, and the space in which the robots live, the cyberspace, isn't three-dimensional. It doesn't have evolution. It doesn't have all the things that we evolved with, and I think it's going to be a very lonely place for us in the end. If you put a human in a sensory deprivation tank, they go crazy. I think it's not going to be a human existence in there. Humans are not going to be the native life form. It'll evolve into something else, or something else will happen very quickly. And I think we're naive to not notice this fact about our biological existence.
It's not, I think virtual reality, which I think will be a place to be and meet other people, will end up being a superset of real reality. We will, our bodies are very important to us. Most of our, in my chapter on bodies, I talk about how most of our thinking is directed towards our bodies, protecting it, feeding it, nurturing it, providing for its myriad needs and desires and wants. But there's no reason why we will have bodies. In virtual reality, we will have left, right, up and down. There'll be virtual environments which may not have these things and which may have different properties, but we'll have a myriad of very lifelike virtual reality environments, so we can take a walk together on a virtual Cancun beach, or have this meeting in a virtual Mozambique game preserve, or a building like this and have the lights go out. But at the end of my book, my fictional character Molly says I can have a body anytime I want, and that's true in virtual reality and also in the morphing qualities of real reality, which will be feasible through things like self-organizing nanobot swarms, which can create the kind of morphing qualities we associate with virtual reality and real reality.
Yeah, except that I agree with all that, but I think the larger world, the world beyond Earth, and the world of more subtle encodings, where there's lots more room than there is with the sort of large energy per bit that we're currently implemented in, will be different. We can recreate any reality, but in fact, I think the evolution of our descendants will in fact push them into new realms, and they'll become entirely different things than we are now. And I think that's an interesting and good thing. And I don't see why you're disturbed about that. There was an eager person up there. Yes, eager person.
The panel is making the assumption that spirituality exists as a result of the material world, but isn't spirituality derived from a non-material world?
As I said earlier, I didn't want to invite to my panel people who I knew would reject out of hand the idea that consciousness or feelings or such things would in principle be impossible for other substrates, such as a silicon substrate. I wanted to assume that it's a function of pattern and not of material. That may not be bought into by the audience, but that's what I wanted my panel basically to be composed of. That's a very interesting question, though. Many people have different opinions on it.
Stephen Gould wrote a book trying to argue for separate magisteria to separate the spiritual from the scientific. But unfortunately, there are already scientists who do not admit that boundary. Like E.O. Wilson wrote a book in 1978, I can't remember the title right now, won a Pulitzer Prize. And if you read chapter 1 of his book, he basically says, we'll just do a natural history of the brain, figure out why we believe what we believe, and then decide what we want, thereby extending the domain of science to include all the spiritual. So that line is, if that was considered a bright line, it's been stepped over at least once. I would argue he's probably stepped back at this point, but I suspect other people will walk up and want to step over that line as well. And I think the people who have a traditional view of spirituality will find that very disturbing. They just haven't been told yet.
Yes, Ray?
I'll make a quick comment on that. But in my view, what's supremely spiritual is our pattern, and the pattern of a human being is immensely complex and rich and deep, and for me has spiritual value. And if I think about what I am I this stuff that's comprised of my body and brain? Well, these particles are changed over within a matter of months. I'm not the same particles at all that I was months ago. I mean, on a cellular level, you can talk about it in a matter of years. On a matter of particles, its turnover is much more rapid. We're really much more like the pattern of patterns that water makes the ripples in a stream. The actual water molecules pass through in milliseconds, but that pattern can remain stable and maybe change gradually over hours and days and months. But that pattern is something that represents our essential essence, and that's something that we will gain greater understanding of as we go through the century.
In fact, I struggle with that in the last chapter of my book. Basically, because of debates, including some of the people supporting Searle, and the conclusion I was led to was that, in fact, it's not even just a pattern, but it's an interpretation of the pattern, is what we really are. And it's actually possible to look at a person, if you were smart enough and could model them in sufficient detail, as a mechanical device with input-output behavior entirely determined by the pattern of connections, basically like a wind-up toy. And the superintelligent alien coming down may look at us in that way most naturally, not having the interpretation that we generally use for this is a belief and this is a feeling and this is a model of ourselves. I think with the robots, though, they'll naturally get that interpretation because that's how we will begin to look at them. And within that interpretation in which there are beliefs and feelings, the robots will believe they themselves have beliefs and feelings. So it may be a chimera. It may not have. It doesn't have much to do with the material reality. The material reality is just a substrate where an observer interprets the existence of these patterns. But in fact, these patterns can be mapped, and it should be possible to find consciousness in anything. This is one of the Searle lines. The blackboard doing WordStar, or Putnam, the intelligence in the rock, because there is a mapping of the particles in the rock, say their thermal motions, which it's a complex mapping, but it maps them into a program that's an artificial intelligence program in which they have feelings and beliefs. And anybody can look at the rock if they were smart enough and make that mapping just in their heads and see feelings and beliefs in the rock. So that means that actually all possible worlds exist and all kinds of strange consequences, which I think are not inconsistent with physical reality as we know it, but which have the consequence that, in fact, physical reality itself is just a way of looking at things. And the things that are doing the looking are entities that, of course, exist in the physical reality, at least in one way of looking at it. Basically, we don't really exist. We only think we do.
There's one question here I'm going to read. It says, John Holland said we can't expect machine intelligence in the near future, even using evolutionary methods, because we don't have the theoretical basis. Doesn't the fact that intelligence evolved naturally contradict the need for theory?
There's a little matter of time involved.
I think that was pretty much the answer I anticipated. Yes.